I'm so delighted that you accepted to come on We Can Learn to Learn, the public information that I would like all the teachers and administrators and anybody in education and parents and students to have access to. It's hard for children to obtain their occupational therapist, speech language therapist, physical therapist. There are just not enough providers around. And so that's one of the reasons why I thought this could be a place where parents can come to and at least get a feeling, an idea from an expert such as yourself in the field, and then they can venture out with that information and attain the correct service for their children, at least advocate for it. Teachers are experiencing more students with language delays. And I'd like you to verify or say, no, that's not true. And they don't really know what to do about it. So one of my biggest questions for you, because I know you do teacher training as well, is how can we provide teachers with a few ways that they can integrate into the classroom routine that they originally have? One of the things that I do is I say, clap out the words. They might not be able to hear all the different sounds. Yeah, please go ahead.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I feel strongly that a collaboration between a classroom educator, related service providers who are also part of a child's overall team, and then thinking more broadly again as collaborators across an entire school setting, I think it's really important that classroom teachers do have connections with speech and language therapists who are part of their community so that there can be a dialogue that goes back and forth because, as you say, there is a need for a language-rich program to be present and intentionally part of the classroom itself. And of course, there's curriculum that, teachers and schools are working through, but on top of that, supplemental to that, how can we intentionally grow our communication skills if we're thinking in terms of language comprehension and then language expression and then social pragmatic language as another domain, which is really about dialogue and using our language in social contexts to connect, to question, and to make our thoughts come to life in our communities by having a real conversation. That's where that social language piece becomes so important. And so for our classroom teachers, to even begin with that framework, that language is not just, a collection of vocabulary words or a grammatical sentence construction. Of course, those pieces are vitally important, but it goes a little bit broader than that. When we think about language as how can we support language comprehension? How can we support language expression? And then how can we support that social, purposeful, pragmatic usage of the language? This is a helpful framework to start with.
Yeah.
And I think when we think about language comprehension and strategies to support that, thinking about something that's relevant for our earliest learners and early childhood settings all the way up through our high school adolescent students. This piece of taking abstract information and making it concrete through the use of visuals is something that I think is really, really powerful, because if we consider a child who may be on the autism spectrum, who may have language learning delays that they're experiencing in their early childhood, or who may have something else in their developmental and medical profile that causes them to experience language differently, regardless of the origin for a child's need for language support, we can consider some key things that we can rely on and use. And so I think that providing concrete visuals to guide transitions,
Yeah.
I think using concrete visuals to help to actually have a visualization that links with a verbal, a linguistic production.
Yeah.
These are tools that we can use to really support our students who are working to increase their confidence and accuracy in comprehending language. And transition points are tricky during the day because there's so many moving parts that someone has to make sense of and feel secure enough to participate in.
Yeah.
So if we can support them by mapping that out, that increases confidence, it increases a ability to be consistent and repetitively use the same tool every day because it's already concretely there for you. That helps with teachers who are in a fast-paced environment and they have to be doing many things all at once to care for so many. So by taking challenging abstract pieces of the day and supporting it visually, it actually helps the whole classroom community, I believe.
What I found out, what I'm facing this year is a student who is conceived and born during COVID, has global delays, is smart. I can tell he's got a lot of potential. His language is, he's 3 years old, but his language is that of a 2-year-old. And it's coming on board, but emotionally, he has challenges in balancing and not tantruming when he doesn't get what he wants. And he's also not safe in his body. So as he learns more ways to express himself, which I do basically by talking, everything that we do, I narrate, give him words, I model, and I clap out the syllables. However little he can do, even if it's pointing, do you want to go up or you want to go down? You want to go to swimming pool or just swimming? And some of these things, they actually help. We thought of doing things visually, but he's more kinetic. That's the point I was trying to make. He's much more kinetic. So moving through areas is more meaningful for him. For some reason, visually, he just doesn't necessarily connect.
And that's where we have to know our individual clients and how to specifically differentiate instruction to meet a individual client's specific learning needs. Because if we're thinking about general strategies that would be beneficial for an entire classroom that a general education teacher could put into practice, we want to start with a broader bucket. And then as we get to know our specific clients who have already in place a therapeutic team, the team has to be ready to go much deeper to be able to really differentiate and individualize strategies to meet a child's needs. And so that is something that, continuously circles back to the idea of collaboration, and that the strongest tool we have is access to our team members, because a classroom teacher is going to need a sounding board to work through figuring out, this is a strength area for this child, but this is an area that's not yet a strength area for him. And we have to be able to recruit his strength, which is what I hear you saying with using his, predisposition to do well with tactile and kinesthetic, information and interacting with the world in that way. We have to see our clients through a strengths-based approach. And sometimes even taking that mindset and sharing that language with our classroom teachers can be helpful as well. Because when we see the child through a strengths-based approach, then we are less overwhelmed by, something's amiss over here. We're able to say, but he does really well in this way, so I can modify something that has worked well for a large bucket, tweak it and redirect it a little bit to be in line with his strengths. And so I think that's a key tool as well, viewing our students, clients, and children in general through a strengths-based approach.
Yeah, definitely strength-based. Of course, our whole education system is we have to meet criteria. So, there comes the rub, and within a certain framework. And Meredith, I have 2 students who are supposed to be getting speech and OT, and they have not received speech yet. So there is no team. That's what I'm trying to say to you, that the teachers, they need ideas. And you just mentioned a few ideas for which I'm very grateful. What about parents at home? What can they do to support their children?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, there's a lot more strategies that can be put into place to, as I was saying, sharing about the language comprehension and then thinking about language expression and then language pragmatics. Each one of those buckets is going to contain within it a multiple different strategies and approaches that people could consider. So I think one that you mentioned that I really like to use as well, that is very accessible to any grown-up working with a child. They do not have to be a speech and language therapist. They could be a parent in a family. They could be a classroom teacher. Narrating each step of what is going on provides modeling. It also provides a sense of security in the child when they are also experiencing and comprehending their environment. They know through that language, being spoken, that repetition, the explanation, that grown-up is experiencing the same thing the child is right along with them. And that allows for a lot of trust and connection to build, which we know is so important too.
Yeah.
And again, it offers something that we know is critical, which is repeated exposure to vocabulary and sentence structures. So by narrating, we're actually increasing the exposure opportunities.
Yeah.
So I would encourage any grown-up, does not have to be any particular discipline or anyone at all, should really talk through what they're doing and maybe consider taking it one step forward, which is also narrating their own thoughts.
Exactly.
And ideas too, because as grown-up people here on planet Earth, we're thinking so many things at any given time. And by modeling, by describing and explaining, where did I leave my shoe? I can't find that shoe. Oh, it's a bit frustrating. Where is it? Oh, I better check the closet again. Oh, there it is. Oh, I lost this. I'm going to turn on my flashlight. Let me check under the couch. Really just narrating in tandem. I feel I'm doing all in one package really provides models, it provides increased exposure, and it provides a sense of stability and security for the child because they are then totally linked up with how their grown-ups are experiencing that environment. So that's another piece that I think is really helpful.
That's right. Allowing the children to problem solve, and by us modeling it, how we do it by showing our thought process and engaging them. What do you think I should do? Where do you think my shoe is? Et cetera, et cetera.
Yes. Bringing them into it as well, because that links again also into the pragmatic, the social use of language by offering them a doorway into the conversation as well. You are immediately setting the stage for that back and forth dialogue to occur. And at the same time, you're meeting the child's self-esteem needs by allowing them to be a really valuable part of the problem-solving team.
Yes.
And so there's multiple layers of meeting a child's needs that can be accomplished through that just really intentional awareness of the different domains of language use. That's another piece that I like to highlight for both family members and teachers and community members at large is how to consider a child's level of needs in terms of, our classic Maslow's hierarchy, starting with our physiological needs and moving up through our safety, our belonging, our esteem, our cognitive,
yes.
and then our self-actualization stacks on top of that. And I think it's really helpful. Again, some of the most important things we can do is just have a clear framework in our mind about how we're going about these interactions with our students and clients, because that's going to open the doors, I think, for the best learning opportunities that are meeting the child where they're really at.
Well, I also know that you use a lot of not only are you a musician, a performance, who performs, right? But you also use a lot of music in your private practice. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's a really great linking point with the tactile and kinesthetic experience of language and learning, because when we're thinking musically, a big part of that is rhythmic. And when we're thinking musically, a huge part of that is melodic. And when we think about language, we actually have a sense of rhythm in language. And that is, as you were describing as well, using clapping and tapping as tactile pacing cues can be beneficial to help to really, instead of finding the beats in a time signature, they allow us to segment the language. So are we starting off by clapping each word? That's what I would suggest first, because it starts with the biggest beat, so to speak, or the biggest, unit of meaning. And then we can clap out syllables, which are parts of words. And then we can also clap out and parse through individual phonemes or sounds that exist within a word. And so if we are thinking about that, upside down triangle of the big to the medium to the small, we can then break that down in a way that is rhythmic. And humans are naturally designed to experience rhythm. And so I think that taps into something that is not only a helpful tool, but it really speaks to something that's just intrinsic. And it allows for the child to experience that in their whole body. Exactly. And it's not locked into the auditory verbal domain that can be overly taxed for many young learners already. It decreases that threshold and makes the interaction more holistic with challenging, small, minute, pieces of language. So that's pretty exciting.
It's also playful.
Yes, it's playful, it's enjoyable, it creates these shared experiences that go beyond, a instructor setting out a task that a child then feels they have to comply with. It's more shared. And that's meaningful.
Yeah. So we're back to community, back to learning within the context of our environment, back to learning how to express our wants and needs in a way that is less frustrating when we have language, when we have people model, how do you ask for something, And so unfortunately, our time has come to an end, but it sounds to me like we have plenty more to talk about. So maybe we can have part 2 of Meredith on language.
Thank you so much, Mina. Thank you.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome. It's my pleasure. And I look forward to seeing you soon.